children, right? Children have to be at the center of everything that we do. Everything. We are all here to serve children. We are all parents. We are all grandparents. We are teachers. We are people who love community. Children matter the most. If it ain't about my child, if it ain't about children, what are we talking about? What are we talking about? What are we wasting time on? Can this child in 4th, 5th, 6th grade read this book to me? If they cannot, we have a problem, and we have to go back and figure out why that's not the case. Why that's not the case. So, a little bit of background about me. This is my 17th year in public education. I started out as an elementary school teacher, PS 90 in the South Bronx. I taught there for 5 years. After that, I transitioned my license from a teaching license to a guidance counselor license. So I was hired as a guidance counselor and worked actually as a dean of students at a high school for 3 years in Lincoln Center section of Manhattan. After that, I decided I wanted to become a school principal. Why? Because of my 8 years of experience, I didn't see happening in the schools that I work what I wanted to implement in our schools with our kids. I know how important knowledge of self, how important it is to my life, and how big of a role it played in my life. And I didn't see that happening in our schools, in the schools in which I worked. I know how important self-esteem and self-confidence was to me growing up because of my mother. My mother, when I was 7 years old, she told me I could be anything I wanted to be. And I believed her. And I continue to tell that story because this is this thing called growth mindset. You know, Carol Dweck talks about something called growth mindset, and she wrote a book in scientific studies. And I'm like, what are we talking about? It's not that complicated. My mother, when I was 7, told me I could be anything I want to be. We got to write books on this. We got to do research on this, right? So, but because of that, I believed her, and I still believe her, and I continue to be inspired and motivated and passionate about doing this work. So last time we had a conversation, you kind of asked me what keeps me motivated. It's that foundation, right? And I honestly, personally feel that I was called to do this work because I didn't have a plan to become an educator. I didn't go to college for that. I went to college for business. But after college, I looked at education as an option, and as soon as I walked into a school, I felt this is where I needed to be. You know, I just felt like it was the right place. So I did my training for a year with new leaders for new schools, learned the ins and outs of being an administrator, wrote a proposal for my own school. So I didn't take over the school. I wrote a proposal for my own school. I submitted it to the Department of Education. They accepted it, and my school opened up in September 2009. So I'm actually an education entrepreneur. I'm very proud of it. You know, and from the very beginning, it was all about culturally responsive teaching, right? I know I'm right around the corner from the projects. I know I'm in the Title I community. I know most of my kids are Black and Latino. So I already know what I have to come with. I have to come with empathy. I have to come with compassion. I have to come with high expectations. Doesn't matter where our kids come from, we gotta have high expectations for them. And not high expectations in alignment with a one-size-fits-all standardized test. High expectations in terms of their unlimited creative abilities and the unlimited ideas that we need for them to implement in the world. Dr. Cooper talked about using jazz example earlier, and I'm a different generation, so I'm gonna use the hip-hop example. Same thing happened with hip-hop. The culture was not taken seriously. The art form was not taken seriously in the beginning. It was not. And they continued to refine their culture, and it was a way for them to express themselves. These were kids from the South Bronx, a borough that literally landlords burned the buildings to collect insurance from. Literally. This is what created the culture. And these young kids took speakers out and started throwing park jams. And these dudes started playing records, and they created DJing. They created something from nothing. Kids from the projects, they followed their intuition, they followed their spirit, and they created this amazing art form, hip hop. Wasn't taken seriously, and now look at what it's doing. They have a hip hop archive center at Harvard University. That's how far this culture has come. Right? And just as Dr. Cooper mentioned, Russell Simmons, he was the manager of Curtis Blow. They came out with a song, Christmas Rap, very early on. The first call Russell Simmons received was from England to fly out there and perform that song. So our kids need a global view. They need knowledge of self. And we need to create spaces for them to be incredibly innovative in our schools. One of the reasons why I began to push back against standardized testing is because there's no research base for it. There's no research that tells us if we continue to test kids in grades 3 through 8 annually, that they will get better and they will be college and career ready. There's no research base for that. On the flip side of that, there is a research base that says if we focus on early childhood, birth to age 8, no matter what test you give them after that, they will be fine. But we've never invested in early childhood. But we've invested in testing year after year after year. Why? Because the test companies are part of corporations who come from Wall Street who want to make money in education. It's about money, it's not about children. So if you invest accordingly early childhood, if you invest in supporting the families who struggle, because we have families that struggle, that need support, and if you invest in adult education, then the kids will improve. There was a study done looking at African American achievement in the 90s, right? And, excuse me, from 1970 to 1990. And in 1970, there's a national standardized test that's given every couple of years. It's called the NAEP, which is like the most accurate sort of barometer of how we're doing as a country. So in 1970 on this test, the achievement gap between whites and blacks was 50 points. 50-point achievement gap. By 1990, it was a 20-point gap. So white achievement kind of stayed the same, black achievement increased tremendously. And the study showed that the number one factor in this growth was the socioeconomic status of the parents improving during that time. So if I'm a parent, I didn't finish high school, and I get a chance to go back and kind of, because you know, as you get older, you realize, oh, I made mistakes. I wish I could go back, right? So if you realize you made those mistakes, you get the opportunity to go back, and you better yourself, what happens? You feel better about yourself, your self-esteem improves, your self-confidence improves, you're more able to help your child, and now your child, it's a whole different tone in the home, right? So what happens? They notice that the children began to do better. But we don't invest in adult education and continuing education, and we don't invest in early childhood. Do we really want to empower communities, or do we just want to take them over and gentrify them? Which is what they've been doing historically.
That's happening all over the country.
All over the country, right?
Washington, D.C.
Part of the testing movement and part of this charter movement is about gentrifying companies. I've seen it in communities. I've seen it happen in Harlem. They come in with the school first, they improve the community, then they buy up real estate, open up these new businesses, and then they move in, and then people who can't handle it, they move out.
Can't afford it either.
And what's happened simultaneously with this? Mass incarceration. Right? So for the people who don't give it together, we got private jail cells for you. And Jeff Sessions just approved, you know, Obama tried to decrease the number of private prisons before he left. Jeff Sessions just reversed that. Right? So we have to power ourselves in our own communities to make our schools what we want them to be. And that happens with ideas, and that happens with research-based ideas. So I'm an advocate, as I mentioned before, of early childhood education. Why? Because between conception and age 3, the brain develops rapidly, very rapidly. If that child is experiencing trauma during that time, it stagnates the brain's development. So now, even if you have universal pre-K, by the time they're 4, it's too late. You're still playing catch up at that time. So we need to invest in in conception to age 3 to make sure that home environment is nurturing and that child has a sense of love and self-esteem and self-confidence so that their brain develop adequately and they can be ready for school. If we do that, the challenges that teachers face in kindergarten and even in pre-K will be decimated somewhat, because now we targeted where the need is. The need is early childhood, particularly in high-risk families. There's something called ACEs, and you can look this up. Adverse Childhood Experiences, ACEs. And you could actually take an ACE survey. So look up ACEs, take the ACE survey, and it scores or tallies the number of traumatic experiences you've had as a child. Things from like divorce, living with someone who's a victim of alcohol abuse, drug abuse, any type of domestic violence, experience a move, anything like that. So it tallies up these traumatic experiences, right? And what they found is when you have a disproportionate number of traumatic experiences, that impacts your health outcomes later in life. And it impacts your educational achievement because your brain literally stagnates in its development. So it's not a mystery why poor whites, Black and Latino students continue to lag behind, because these are the communities that have been historically oppressed throughout this country's history. But as it was mentioned earlier, we haven't looked at ourselves as a country deeply underneath. What are the unconscious impulses that are driving who we are as a country? What are the underlying assumptions that drive who we are as a people of all races and cultures? Because it's those unconscious impulses that dictate our behavior, right? So early childhood education, we have to invest there. We have to invest in adult education. We have to invest in comprehensive literacy in elementary school. We gotta make sure our kids know how to read. And in order to do that, we have to invest in teacher training to make sure they are prepared and they're coming in prepared. So we have to hold higher education accountable. I was telling someone last night, why do I have to invest $20,000 of my school budget to retrain teachers when they just did 4 years of college or 6 years of college? I could use that $20,000 for tutoring or something else, as opposed to reinvesting in teacher training. I don't mind doing it because teachers have to be good in this profession. You have to always learn because things are always evolving and kids are so amazing and unique. You have to always make sure you're meeting their needs, but you shouldn't have to retrain them on how to teach reading if they're supposed to be coming in as reading specialists. So we have to hold higher ed accountable as well. The number one group to hold these groups accountable are parents. I'm gonna keep coming back to that. It's parents, and not always not parents working individually. Parents working with other parents, and parents working with teachers who really care for kids and want to do right by kids, and parents working with high school students. Leverage your high school students. Talk to them. Let them tell you about their education experience. See what they have to say. Get them involved politically. There's something that I didn't write up there that I want you to write down right now, if you don't mind. Powertopublic.org. Powertopublic.org. And what we're trying to do is empower public school stakeholders throughout the country to take back their neighborhood schools and implement what needs to happen and what's right for our schools. Powertopublic.org. When you get a chance, go there. There's a pledge. Take the pledge. We'll have your information and we'll follow up with you. So another thing we need to do moving forward is we have to prepare our kids to solve the complex problems of our society. Mass incarceration, drug abuse and addiction, low college graduation rates, poverty, economic instability, and the economic gaps. We have to prepare our children to solve those problems. We can't wait for President Trump to solve them.
He is going to solve them.
Okay? We can't wait for Governor Cuomo to solve them. We can't wait for individuals to solve them. You can't. We are a country of, for, and by the people, yes? Yes? Are we a country of, for, and by the people? Are we the people?
We're supposed to be, but we're not there.
We have to prepare our young people to solve those problems. And in order to prepare them to solve the problems, the curriculum, what they learn in school, has to look a certain way. Right? So critical thinking is essential. Critical thinking is essential, not biased thinking, right? Because here's what happens. This used to happen with my mom. You know, when Obama